Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Okay, everyone, thanks for joining us on the show today. Excited about this guest because we focus a lot on the buying of property, holding of property, how property relates to an overall strategy, and often we touch on the actual renting of property, and by and large, the main focus of that is finding a long-term tenant, and hopefully they pay the rent over time. So we're going to have a chat around a bit of an alternative strategy, and that's short-term rentals. This has grown in popularity considerably over recent time, made popular by your sort of Airbnbs and other types of platforms. So investors are starting to look at property and property management, portfolio management differently. And that is putting short-term rentals into your properties, or alternatively, if you have periods of time where your owner-occupied property is vacant, if you're away or you're on business, short-term rentals can be a very good situation or scenario that may work. Mark Hodge, he's the director of a business called Maisonnets. Mark, how are you going?
Good, thank you. Very well.
So short-term rentals, we'll get into it in a second, but you're a property investor, and that's probably going to be a good lead into talking about short-term rentals, I imagine.
Yeah.
How long have you been investing in property?
Oh, I think I bought my first property in 1994.
Okay.
Oh, no, 95 it was. Yeah. And I was a performer most of my life. I started off investing in shares and built up a bit of a portfolio and used that as a deposit for my first property, which was actually a rental property.
In Sydney?
No, in Queensland.
Okay.
The property market had dropped quite considerably up there during that time, and I managed to buy the property for about $30,000 less than what it was sold for originally because of the recession, and was cash flow positive from day one. So my second one was actually in Melbourne. That was a rental property as well, same scenario.
Do you still have the original property in your portfolio?
No, I don't.
Sold it at some point? Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. You mentioned you're a performer. What sort of? So your job was being a performer?
Yeah, I was a professional dancer for most of my life. My father was an acrobat and toured the world for about 6 years, did a grand performance for the Queen, and his partner was a choreographer and suggested he got me started. Okay. So I was with the Australian Ballet Company. I did a lot of ballroom and Latin. I did quite a few series on Dancing with the Stars when they first started. I had about 17 years in musical theatre, touring with Chicago, Cats, Singing in the Rain, Hello Dolly. Priscilla was the last one. I was dance captain on that show. But of course, like any athlete, you have a time limit. And I had a lot of injuries. I had 2 shoulder repairs because I was virtually the forklift in every show. I had to lift all the girls. And then I had a hip replacement. So my other passion was property. And that's how that all started.
So we'll unravel that journey. So I really liked how you dancing, obviously, but you're an athlete. So your peak performance, right? It's a very physical job, and you've got a period of time before you need to retire and do something else. Did you miss the former life?
Yeah, I did. I went through a lot of depression when I had my first shoulder injury in Priscilla, and I lost a lot of confidence being around theatre people because I felt like I let the team down. I felt like I didn't have a sense of purpose. And I got back on stage after 9 months, and then I had the second one went. The surgeon said if one goes quite often with what you're doing, the other one will go. And that was when I decided that I had to look into other areas. So I was teaching, I was choreographing, I was also the main dance lecturer at NIDA for the musical theatre students. And 2 years ago, I was in LA on a holiday, and I got hit by a car. Okay. And I ended up in a back brace for about 6 months, had broken spine. And that's kind of pushed me into where I am now.
Okay. That's getting hit by a car is probably not a... it was just one of those things that just happened. It was a freak accident.
Yeah. It was a hit and run. Yeah, unfortunately.
Wow.
But I'm here to
tell the story, and here we are to tell the story. Yeah. So before I get into the property stuff, can you tell me, I'm interested because I don't have a theatrical bone in my body. What's the culture of working in like with a type of thespians, right? Like people who, my view of the theatre is, it's always from sitting in the crowd and watching it. I imagine it's got a unique culture. which most people probably wouldn't understand. Is it quite a competitive?
Look, it is competitive, and some people say, "Oh, it must be so hard and cutthroat," but there's actually a lot of camaraderie, and it's a real team experience. Like, I guess, a football team, a basketball team, everyone pulls together, and if something goes wrong, everyone really pulls together to make sure that the audience doesn't know, or pokes fun if it's obvious that, like, in West Side Story years ago, the whole set stopped in the middle of a production with Marina Pryor, and it was very, very comical. And there was a lot of ad lib, and people they kind of think out the square. Performers think outside the square and just pull it all together. And quite often it's more entertaining for the audience. But everyone's very supportive, and I guess, because we wear our heart on our sleeves, people are probably a lot more emotional and in touch with their feelings as well.
So people are happy to talk about what's going on, I imagine.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the way it is. Which
Absolutely.
is quite a nice culture to work within. I think it's absolutely intriguing, having watched a fair bit of theatre. It's, you have to sit there and for me, it would be an experience, and I expect the absolute best show possible, whereas you might be doing 2-3 shows a day. So how do you, and this is more about mindset and psyche, how do you deliver your absolute best every single time, even though you might have a hangover or whatever? Is that hard?
It is. Some days it's very hard. There's been times that you're exhausted, you get to the end of the week, and you really just have to push yourself and try and bring something new into every performance. Not like you want to change the performance, but just your thought process, and also it's about eating properly and drinking properly, and it's just remaining healthy, because you do 8 shows a week, and plus all the classes and training that goes with that. We quite often used to have understudy rehearsals through the day as well, so it's pretty full on.
Yeah. So now property full time?
Yeah.
Do you look back and think, I'm happy I don't have to be on all the time, or you're still on, I guess? It's just a different sort of on.
I'm probably more on now than I was back then. It's 7 days a week with what we do now. Yeah.
So what is it you guys do? So I mentioned very briefly sort of short-term rentals, an alternative to putting long-term tenants in your properties.
Okay.
How's it evolved?
Well, what happened a few years ago, I had a lot of problems with long-term tenants. You always hear the story, the other side with the short-term. But years ago, my first property on the Gold Coast, I was informed that I had a gang leader in one of the property, in my property, and the community estate that it was in was being terrorised by this particular person, and I had to evict them. So that was my first scenario. It took quite a while to get them out. Luckily, I had landlord insurance, because there was about 7 or 8 weeks that they didn't pay rent, and I had to claim that back. I have another property here in Sydney, which I'd had a few problems with tenants, and I had to renovate a kitchen because of what was done. I had moved them out. I moved back into my property for a while in Surrey Hills, and then I was notified. I had another experience with an agent where they lost a washing machine in one of the changeovers, and I didn't realise. So I had to get the agent to pay for that, to put it back in again. I was notified just before Christmas, about 2 weeks before they moved out, that they were moving out, and it's the worst time of the year to try and get anyone in. So rather than them calling me, there was an email which went missing, and I acted pretty fast because I had some friends that were using Airbnb, and I thought, I'm just going to try this over Christmas. I was also going to change to go to another real estate agent. So I said, look, I'll just do it over Christmas, see what happens. I put it up one night. Within 8 hours, I had about 8 inquiries. And within 4 weeks, I had it booked out for the next 6 months with about 10 days free.
Okay.
Now, I'd gone from $520 a week fully furnished to between $900 to $1,100 a week. And I thought, wow, this is great. So the agent that I was going to transfer my property to rang me just after Christmas and said, how's it all going? And I said, well, do you want the good news or the bad news? And so obviously I guess we know what the bad news was for the agent, but I kept that going for short-term rental. Then what had happened was they had actually called me into the office because I knew these guys. I did a little bit of real estate years ago with them, and they were keen for me to possibly come over and work and run a short-term rental division within the agency. Now, that particular franchise didn't want to do short-term, so we didn't go ahead with that. But I had somebody else that spoke to me about starting a business, and I'd already had a few friends that were going away and wanted me to manage their property for them. And they said, look, we don't want to know anything about apps or cleans or meet and greet. Can you handle it for us and we'll pay you? I said, yeah, sure. So that's how it happened. I also had a friend of mine that was starting up a seminar for alternative cash flow propositions for property. And he said that what I was planning to do was the missing piece of the puzzle. So we developed this company just on 2 years ago now, and it was pretty much propelled after I had the accident because I had to survive. And we now have about 80 properties that we manage on either a full-time or a part-time basis. I have a lot of investors that get more cash flow out of their property this way, but I also have a lot of people that own their property and go away for 4 months, they're retired and want to get extra income and pay for their holiday. So that's how the business started, and I think we've got about 80 properties now.
Okay. Are they all in the Sydney area or?
No, we do Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Wollongong. We just started in Canberra, went down there last week and took the first lot of shots. It got listed on Sunday, and we've already had a 12-day booking and a 3-day booking come in, which is great. But we actually have, as well as my own property, we have 3 what I call head leases. So we operate the lease, and the owners are fully aware of what happens. So we have a few properties where there's one in Rushcutters Bay, which is actually $500 a week we pay for, just another little studio, and we get around $1,200 to $1,400 for that as well. Okay. So we lease it from the owner. We've got another one in Maroubra, another one in Potts Point, and then we sublet it, and we insure everything and supply all the furniture and linen, do all the meet and greets, the concierge, the clean, the whole lot.
So for you, it's really a margin play. So the owner gets a guaranteed rent.
That's right.
And anything you make on top of that, you deal with all the hassle, and you also get paid for doing it, which is not a bad scenario. So potentially, to the example you use, you can double the rental you're receiving. What would you be looking at in terms of occupancy rates of a short-term rental? You're never going to get 100%, right?
No. Well, in Sydney, I can tell you, because our accountant's just gone through all the figures, the occupancy varies from 72 to around 87% across the board, depending on where that is. Obviously, there's some places that are just booked. I mean, we get same-day turnarounds with most of the Sydney properties. Brisbane does very well, but I'm very choosy with where we actually take on property as well. We get a lot of people asking us, but it might not be the right area.
I imagine it needs to be close to the centre of town. You get a lot of tourists coming in, or short-term business people. Is that pretty much the client base that you use?
We do actually. We get a lot of corporates. We also have the properties that are near hospitals and universities are always really well occupied. We've got one in Wollongong. I went down to look at 2 that particular day before Christmas. They were getting $450 a week. I suggested to the owner, to do a few things. She had to do minor renovations. She did all of that. There was one property which was nicer in a different area. This property needed work, but it was 2 minutes walk across to Wollongong Hospital and a 15-minute walk to the uni. She did everything I told her to do, and 8 days after it was listed, we'd already had 8 weeks of bookings in there for her. And I think her first booking was 1164. So for a week.
Yeah.
And that's a big change from $450.
So you manage the whole process. For a lot of people thinking, oh, I quite like this idea, I can do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Can you run me through the reality of short-term rentals? Because I imagine it's a bit of a headache sometimes to try and do it yourself.
Yeah, all right. Well, we sync now. We don't only do Airbnb. We sync to about 70 different booking platforms. There's about 250 worldwide. Thankfully, we don't have to go and block different calendars. We've got a system that can sync the whole lot.
Yeah.
But we have our team that handle all the guest inquiries, and some days you can spend a whole day going back and forth before you secure the booking to begin with. But we'll go in, we'll assess the property, we'll suggest styling. We've got photographers that I work with that know exactly what we want. It's not just a property shot, it's a lifestyle shot as well, to make it really feel welcoming. We do all of that. We do the meet and greet. So we arrange to meet them at the property, take them through. We have cleaners and people that assess anything. So if there's any damage done, which doesn't happen very much, but if something's broken, it has to be attended to. And we submit that straight away so that we go through a resolution to claim that back, because we put security deposits on properties as well. And obviously we do cleaning. We have in Sydney and Melbourne, we have a linen service. So in the other regions, we have their own linen that's taken off-site to a laundromat, that's changed over. We have 2 or 3 sets of linen, and then it's brought back. But in Sydney and Melbourne, we actually have a full linen service, which is great.
Yeah. So I'm sort of thinking through all the variations of running a short-term rental. So you said you sync with a whole bunch of different listing platforms. So I think a lot of people think I'll put my property up on Airbnb. So that's the individual, the owner doing it themselves. But a lot of the properties you see on Airbnb would be managed by a management company rather than the individual themselves. So
some of them, a lot of I can normally tell who the individuals are just by the marketing blurb, because I do all the marketing blurbs for the properties. Yeah. And you will get a host that's there, and you don't always know if it's going to be the owner or not. But once you read through the listing, you can pretty much tell.
You can tell.
Yeah.
So how does Airbnb work? Because I've never listed anything I've got on Airbnb, but what cut do they typically take from?
Okay, so the great thing, and I think this is why, I mean, Airbnb's only been around for 10 years, but you've got Stays that's been around for about
quite some
25.
Time. Is that 25 years?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
Bookings.com is the oldest and the biggest, and that pretty much started when internet started. So that's how long that's been around. But the reason why Airbnb has been so successful is because they are trying to be as community-based as they possibly can. So they're more responsible. The hosts are more responsible for looking after the guests. The guests are supposed to be responsible for looking after the owner, but quite often Airbnb will favour the guests, as we've had a few problems with resolution, and guests do lie about things so that they can claim money back. And that's where we have to be really careful with using the app and writing everything down that actually happens. We've had a few instances this week. But what they do, and they spread the commission out, so 10% is paid by the guest to Airbnb. Around 3% goes from the owner's takings. So in essence, they're getting about 13%. But then you've got some of the booking platforms are 25%, and that's
so they put the margin on top of. So if you say I want to list something for $500, they'll apply their margin on top of it, and then they'll take a small percentage from the actual piece at the
that's right.
And every booking platform is a different model.
Yeah, that's right. Airbnb is pretty much the only one that spreads it out between the guest and the owner. Yeah. And I think that's why it's become so popular.
Okay. So I'm just trying to work out so you need to get paid for the management of a property, and that's the hard work. Attracting the right people, but also ensuring that the property is of the standard to meet the needs of the market, what people are paying for. So
absolutely.
So how much of your business is finding new properties to list for clients versus managing those properties that you have right now? Is it 50-50? I imagine you're always looking to grow, so you're looking for new properties. But
so I'm usually the one that I'm the one that actually finds the business and sets all the pricing, says whether or not I think that property is in the right area. And I used to fly between each state to do that. We've now got somebody in Melbourne, a manager in Melbourne, who is quite capable of doing that. Will always call me if he's got any questions.
Yeah.
So I pretty much do that. We have a team that handles the back end as well, in the bookings and in the cleaning department. So that's all sourced as well.
Good. And when you're chatting to a potential investor and you're obviously selling the reasons why short-term rentals is more favourable than a long-term rental, what are the sort of main objections you get when that people don't really get, or they've got preconceived ideas why short-term rentals isn't right for them?
I guess, because there's been so many stories in the paper about party houses and all of that, that's the biggest turn-off. With what we're able to do, and two of the booking platforms, bookings.com and Expedia, are the worst when it comes to security. And they don't. They pass it on to us. We've worked out a system now of vetting because there has been a bit of fraudulent card activity, and that's been in the papers as well, in the media. We know exactly how to stop that, and we've sent out messages to those guests before they arrive, and in each case, they've actually cancelled their bookings.
Okay.
We've had no problems from Airbnb, apart from people wanting refunds because, certain things they might not have thought were up to scratch, and we'll try and resolve that. But I guess those sort of things, hearing the party house stuff is probably the worst. But what's happened in those cases is that there's also a lot of instances where there's lock boxes. Airbnb are in favour of lockbox for self-check-in, and I don't like doing that because, to me, you don't know who's going to turn up.
So you want to actually eyeball the guest coming in.
And so that's why I want a concierge there at the property. It's an insurance policy for our clients. And you know who's walking in. You know that it's not 4 people instead of 2 booking. And we've managed to be quite successful doing that. With some of the other platforms, because these people have taken bookings on those platforms, they haven't asked for security or ID, and this is where they come unstuck.
And the purpose of short-term rental is to make more money? Is that
absolutely?
That's the reason, yeah?
I mean, the reason I started was because I was doubling my cash flow. And the great thing about this, and I guess people don't think about the flip side, is that I'm able to go in, or my concierge or cleaners are able to go in every time somebody checks out and check everything.
That's a good point.
And keep the standard of the property to where it should be, so that it's constant.
So you're not getting like 6 monthly inspections, you're getting whenever
right.
it turns over inspections.
Yep.
So then that particular person might have damaged X, and therefore you can repair it rather than trying to do a claim on your insurance.
That's right. There's a whole review system with Airbnb and some of the other platforms. And if your property starts to go downhill, you're not going to get those reviews. So we have to keep it at a standard all the time.
Well, that's the benefits of peer reviews, isn't it? It is immediate, which is good.
Yeah.
How does it work with... So obviously a plus is that you can amplify your earning potential in terms of yields, which is good. A couple of questions around, is there any research around the resale value of properties if it has been short-term rental versus long-term? Do you attract a different type of buyer if it's an established short-term rental place? So are you seeing people buying property for the purpose of it's an established short-term rental place?
I know for a fact, because I know quite a lot of real estate agents in the area that actually ask me about certain properties, and they'll look into buildings and see if the body corporate's okay and all of that. They were getting so many people coming to them, investors wanting to buy property specifically if it was okay to do Airbnb, because they realised they were going to get more cash flow out of it. I don't know if there's any statistics that the property would be higher because of that, but I would imagine that if they know they can get more cash flow out of it.
Yeah, I might look into that, because it sort of makes sense to me. If are people marketing properties as this is an established short-term rental place with 4 years of history on whatever, and are you actually able to transition that history of a property if you buy it on Airbnb, so you keep all the reviews and rankings. I don't know. It's probably an interesting thing to look at.
Well, it's funny because my accountant last year, I've had now I've had 3-4 years. Last year he did my account for the full year. The year before it was half long-term lease, and he rang me and said, "Are you sure these numbers you've sent are right?" And I said, "Oh, how much is it?" And he told me, and I said, "Yep." And he said, "That's more than double." I said, "Yeah." So, if you've got that sort of thing coming from your accountant, then I'm sure it would make a difference.
Yeah. And you mentioned there's two models. You'll take a head lease, or you will be a owner representative. So on the head lease, you obviously you get paid by a margin for what you secure it for and what you lease it for, and you take everything in between.
That's
on the other side, is it a flat fee percentage of any income? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
What sort of percentage range do you operate at?
We did have two different rates that we were doing. The first we started off at was 2 booking platforms. It was synced to 2 different booking platforms, and we charged a meet and greet fee because we've got to pay our concierge to go out there.
Yeah.
And we charged linen fees, taking it to get laundered and bring it back, and that was at 15% with those extra charges. The concierge would charge us $50.
So it's like a flat fee.
Yeah.
Every time there's a new meet and greet, it's a flat fee.
Right.
Yeah.
But we've now managed to find some cleaners who can do the whole linen change, and now we sync, because we've got syncing costs with the software. We can give the clients 70 booking platforms, and we throw in the meet and greet, we throw in the linen, and it's a flat 20% on that. Yeah.
Okay, and imagine most people sit there and do the sums and say, oh, well, if I can, 40%, 50%, 100% times the rental I'm getting to give away a little bit more in terms of fees, the net result should be, and that's how someone should measure and assess it, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Whether or not short-term rentals is right for them. To sort of give it balance, is there any negativity around short-term rentals in terms of securing finance or insurance? I.e., do you need to pay more insurance on a short-term rental?
Yeah, well, there is. I have a wonderful lady. I actually had. I was like the plumber who, was fixing everybody else's taps and not my own. I let my insurance lapse, but she's fixed all of that up for me, and it's really quite reasonable. It's it is a little bit more than landlord protection insurance, but she can cover you for liability and malicious damage, and she can also cover you for loss of income, not just the lease that you're paying, but the actual projected income. So we've got a property in Maroubra, I think. We're paying $750 a week, fully furnished for that one, on a head lease, and we make around $60,000 a year. She can actually claim the whole lot, and if something goes wrong, she can claim that income that we lose as well from that property. She's very switched on, and so the insurance is slightly more, but I think that works out to about $550 a year.
Okay,
and you can do it in monthly instalments as well. What was the other question?
On the financing, does it? Because I know whenever I try and get a new loan, they want to see my rents on everything and stuff coming in and out. Does it make securing financing for additional properties harder?
It is. Well, it's very hard to get finance on a short-term rental. In fact, I don't know of any bank that will do that. They will give you finance on a rental appraisal. But my bank, because I've been doing it for more than 2 years, and I can show proof of that, they will now give me finance on those figures, but not on projected.
This is where it's so the idea of generating more income sounds great, but there is the other side to the equation that you need to balance up. And I think to your point you made, some body corporates don't like short-term leasing as part of the body corporate rules. So you really need to look at that if you're looking to buy a property on the basis of short-term rentals. Is there anything else on this sort of balance side that you think it's well worth thinking about, whether or not short-term rental is right for you as an investor?
It's whether or not you feel comfortable, because quite often people will look at their calendars and not see anything, but we'll get last-minute bookings all the way through. If you look back at what's actually happened, it's actually quite good, and you don't really have any problems. But a lot of people don't want to take the risk of having a week or two empty, but you kind of make up for it because the returns are so much better.
Great. All right, Martin, I really appreciate you coming in and sharing this. I think a lot of people are blinkered or locked. Blinkered is probably not the word. Locked in the traditional view, as in, you need to get long-term leases in. So for maybe a balanced portfolio, if you have a large portfolio and you're looking at maybe looking for boosting your cash flow, it might be worth having a look at short-term rentals. And obviously it needs to be in the right area, right? It doesn't work for everything.
No.
So it's one of those things. But Mark, I really appreciate you coming in. Let us know what's going on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Nice one. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you're not subscribing to our daily morning newsletter, so you're the first to know what's going on in property markets across Australia, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe. We're also on social media. Just search for Smart Property HQ. You'll track us down and like us and follow us. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.